The workshop clock read 2:47 a.m. when I heard my wife's voice drift down through the heating vents like poison through copper pipes. Alma's words cut through the silence of my basement sanctuary with surgical precision. "I'm not sharing a bed with you while Rylan is in the house." I set down my wire strippers and listened to the floorboards creak above. 23 years of marriage, and I knew every sound this old Massachusetts house made. The heavy footsteps belonged to Rylan Ventor, my supposed best friend since college. The lighter ones were Alma's, pacing like a caged animal. "Cedric's getting suspicious," she continued, her voice carrying that cold edge I'd grown to recognize. "We need to be more careful. I've heard warmer offers from tax auditors." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Cedric Fallon, vice president of Parish Electric Company, a man who'd spent decades understanding the flow of current through complex systems, and I'd completely missed the short circuit happening in my own home. My phone buzzed on the workbench. A text from Alma. "Working late in the shop again? You should get some rest." The timestamp showed she'd sent it 30 seconds ago, while talking to Rylan upstairs, about me. I scrolled through my contacts and found Kalia Ventor's number. Rylan's wife deserved to know what kind of current was flowing through her marriage, too. "Kalia, it's Cedric. I know it's late, but we need to talk. Can you come over? Bring an overnight bag." Her voice sounded tired but alert. "What's wrong?" "Everything. I'll explain when you get here. And Kalia, use the side entrance through the kitchen. Trust me on this." While I waited, I climbed the stairs and stood outside the living room. The conversation had moved, but I could still hear fragments. Alma's voice carried that particular tone she used when planning something, the same one she'd used when convincing me to hire Rylan as our new business development manager 6 months ago. "He's too trusting," Rylan said. "Always has been. Makes this easier." "Don't underestimate him," Alma replied. "Oh, Cedric's smarter than he looks. We just need to be patient." Patient. The word hung in the air like smoke from a burned-out transformer. I retreated to the kitchen and waited. 30 minutes later, Kalia's headlights swept across the driveway. I met her at the side door, noting the worry lines creasing her face. At 34, Kalia Ventor was everything Alma used to be. Genuine, warm, and apparently as clueless as I'd been about our spouse's extracurricular activities. "Cedric, what's going on? You sounded..." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I handed her my phone, opened to a screenshot I'd discovered 3 days ago while fixing Alma's tablet. She'd forgotten to log out of her messaging app. Kalia's face went pale as she read. Then red, then something approaching volcanic. "When did you find this?" "Tuesday. There are more." I showed her the photo gallery I'd been building. Screenshots of hotel reservations, credit card statements for restaurants I'd never been to, text messages that would make a sailor blush. "How long?" she whispered. "Based on what I can prove? 4 months. But knowing Alma, probably longer." Kalia sank into one of the kitchen chairs, still staring at the phone. I thought he was working late. All those business trips, the gym memberships he suddenly needed. The gym where Alma coincidentally started taking yoga classes. This is unbelievable. Believe it. They're upstairs right now, planning their next move. Something about me being too trusting. Kalia looked up, and I saw something shift in her expression. The hurt was still there, but it was hardening into something more useful, something sharper. "What do you want to do about it?" That was the question, wasn't it? 23 years of marriage, 15 years of friendship, and a business partnership that was probably about to get very complicated. The old Cedric would have confronted them quietly, tried to work things out, maybe suggested counseling, but the old Cedric hadn't been played for a fool by the two people he trusted most. I want them to understand that trust, once broken, has consequences, and I want them to experience those consequences in ways they'll never forget. Kalia nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" "For now, just be here when the sun comes up. I've got a family meeting planned, and I want witnesses." "Should I call a lawyer?" "Already done. Mine's been documenting everything since Wednesday." "You've been planning this for days." "I've been planning this since I realized my wife thinks I'm stupid. Turns out, underestimating an electrician is a lot like underestimating electricity itself. Both can be illuminating." Kalia almost smiled at that. Almost. The house settled around us as we waited for dawn. Upstairs, the voices had gone quiet, but I could still hear movement. Alma was probably packing her overnight bag, the one she'd been using for her sister's place visits that I now knew were hotel stays. At 6:15 a.m., I heard Rylan's footsteps on the stairs. He always left early on Fridays, claiming he had breakfast meetings with potential clients. Now I knew he was just trying to avoid awkward morning encounters with the husband he was betraying. I intercepted him at the front door. "Morning, Rylan. Sleep well?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Yeah, thanks for letting me crash here. That leak in my apartment is getting worse." Funny thing about leaks. They always start small, but if you don't fix them quickly, they can bring down the whole structure. Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Fear? Hard to tell with Rylan. He'd always been good at wearing masks. "I should get going. Early meeting." "Actually, I was hoping you could stick around for breakfast. Alma's making her famous pancakes." "I really can't." "I insist." The way I said it made him stop reaching for the door handle. Rylan was 6'2" and spent most of his free time at the gym, but he'd never been particularly brave when it came to actual confrontation. Bullies rarely are. "Cedric, is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect. Why don't you go wake up Alma? Tell her we're having company for breakfast." 20 minutes later, all four of us sat around the kitchen table. Alma had come down in her silk robe, the expensive one she'd bought during one of her shopping trips that I now suspected had been something else entirely. She kept glancing between Kalia and me, trying to read the situation. Rylan looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. I set 2 phones on the table. Alma's backup device, the one she thought I didn't know about, and Rylan's, which I'd cloned Wednesday night while he was in the shower. "I've been thinking about trust lately," I began, pouring coffee like we were discussing the weather. "How it's the foundation of every relationship. Marriage, friendship, business partnerships. Take it away, and everything else crumbles." Alma's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. "Cedric, what are you—" "I'm talking about electricity, honey. See, in my business, we call it a ground fault. When current starts flowing where it shouldn't, through paths it was never meant to take, left unchecked, it can start fires, destroy everything." I picked up Alma's phone and read from the screen. "Tuesday, 3:47 p.m. Can't wait to get away from here. Cedric's becoming suspicious, but he's too weak to do anything about it." The silence that followed was deafening. Wednesday, 11:23 p.m., I continued, switching to Rylan's phone. "Tomorrow night, same hotel. I've got the corporate credit card, so we won't leave a trail." Kalia's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. "Thursday, 2:15 a.m. Once we get control of the company, we can get rid of him properly. He'll never see it coming." Alma found her voice first. "Cedric, I can explain." "No need. It's all very clear. You've been planning to take over Parish Electric, push me out, and run off together. The affair was just the appetizer. The real meal was always my company." Rylan started to stand. "Look, this isn't what you think. Sit down." He sat. "Here's what's going to happen. Alma, you're going to pack your things and leave. Today. Rylan, you're fired. Effective immediately. And both of you are going to discover that trust, once broken, has a way of breaking everything else around it." "You can't fire me," Rylan said, finding some backbone. "I have a contract." "Had. Past tense. Turns out moral clauses are wonderfully specific about conduct detrimental to company interests. My lawyer assures me that planning corporate espionage qualifies." Alma's mask finally slipped completely. "You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you're dealing with." "Enlighten me." "I've been carrying this marriage for years. You're boring, predictable, and completely clueless about what I need. Rylan understands me in ways you never could. Apparently, he understands your bank account numbers too, along with my business secrets, my client lists, and my company's financial data. Very thorough understanding." Kalia spoke for the first time since sitting down. "How long, Rylan?" He couldn't meet her eyes. "Kalia, it just happened." "How long?" 6 months. "Before or after you convinced me to refinance our house to invest in your new business venture?" The question hung in the air like a live wire. I leaned back in my chair, watching the dominoes fall. "Oh, this gets better. What new business venture?" Kalia's voice was ice cold now. "Neat, he said he was starting a consulting firm. Needed startup capital. I mortgaged our house." Alma and Rylan exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. "Let me guess," I said. "The consulting firm was going to specialize in electrical contractors. Maybe even target some of Parish Electric's clients?" "You're paranoid," Alma snapped. "I'm thorough. There's a difference." I pulled out a manila folder and spread its contents across the table. Bank statements, incorporation papers, and a business plan that outlined exactly how Ventor Consulting planned to steal my clients using inside information. Paranoid people don't usually have this much documentation. Rylan's face had gone gray. How did you get these? Amazing what you can find in someone's car when they leave it unlocked in your driveway. Also amazing what people will tell you when you ask the right questions. Your business partner, for instance, was very chatty when I called him yesterday. What business partner? Kalia asked. The one who's been wondering where his investment money went. Apparently Rylan's been using startup funds for hotel rooms and jewelry. Expensive jewelry. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Speaking of which, Alma, this fell out of your purse yesterday. Nice necklace. Must have cost a fortune. Good thing Rylan's business partner is a jeweler, or I never would have known where it came from. Alma's hand went instinctively to her throat, where a thin gold chain caught the morning light. You went through my purse? I went through everything. Your computer, your car, your gym locker. Amazing how much evidence people leave lying around when they think they're smarter than everyone else. The kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock. I'd spent 3 days preparing for this moment, and it was even more satisfying than I'd imagined. Kalia broke the silence. What happens now? Now, Alma packs her things and leaves. Rylan cleans out his office and turns in his company car. And both of them discover that actions have consequences. And if we don't? Rylan asked, some of his old arrogance returning. I smiled. Then I release everything to the police, the state licensing board, and every electrical contractor in Massachusetts. Plus, Rylan's business partner is very interested in filing charges for embezzlement. You're bluffing. Am I? Would you like to test that theory? The look in my eyes must have convinced him, because he slumped back in his chair. This is insane, Alma said. You can't just destroy our lives because you're hurt. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just turning on the lights. Everything that happens next is your choice. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray Massachusetts morning. Behind me, I could hear whispered arguments and the rustle of papers as Kalia examined the evidence. One more thing, I said without turning around. Kalia, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. The guest room is yours. That's very kind, but it's not kindness. It's strategy. See, I've learned something important this week. When people show you who they really are, believe them. And when they try to take everything you've built, make sure they understand the cost of that mistake. I turned back to face them. Alma was crying now, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. Rylan looked like he was calculating his options and finding them all unpleasant. You have until noon to clear out, both of you. After that, things get considerably more complicated. More complicated how? Alma demanded. Well, for starters, I've scheduled a company-wide meeting for this afternoon. Seems like the perfect time to announce some personnel changes. And discuss corporate security. Maybe share some examples of what happens when people violate trust. The color drained from Rylan's face. You wouldn't. Try me. I walked to the kitchen door and paused. Oh, and Alma, you might want to check your credit cards. Turns out when someone commits fraud using company resources, banks get very nervous about extending credit. Something about liability and risk assessment. Her sharp intake of breath told me she understood. Welcome to the consequences, I said, and left them sitting in the wreckage of their perfect plan. In my workshop, I picked up my wire strippers and got back to work. Some circuits, once broken, could be repaired. Others needed to be completely rewired. I was just getting started. The parish electric company occupied a 3-story brick building on the edge of town, the kind of structure that had housed honest businesses for over a century. My grandfather had started the company in 1952, my father had grown it, and my brother Conrad and I had modernized it into one of the most respected electrical contractors in Massachusetts. At least, it had been respected until this morning. I arrived at the office early, as usual, but today I wasn't alone. Kalia had insisted on coming with me, claiming she needed to understand the full scope of what Rylan had been planning. Really, I think she just wanted to watch the fireworks. You sure about this? She asked as we climbed the stairs to the second floor. About which part? Firing my wife's lover, exposing their embezzlement scheme, or completely destroying their plan to steal my company? All of it. Never been more sure of anything in my life. Conrad was already in his office, a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a stack of contracts in the other. At 45, my older brother still looked like the linebacker he'd been in college. Broad shoulders, thick hands, and a face that suggested arguing with him would be unwise. Morning said, You look like hell. Feel worse. We need to talk. I closed his office door and introduced Kalia, then spread out the evidence I'd been collecting. Conrad's expression grew darker with each document. That son of a... He caught himself and glanced at Kalia. Sorry, but this is unbelievable. Believe it. They've been planning this for months. Conrad picked up the business plan for Ventor Consulting and flipped through it. They were going to target our biggest clients, use our pricing data, our project schedules, everything. Gets better. Check the financial projections. He found the page I was referring to and whistled low. They expected to steal 40% of our revenue in the first year. Ambitious, right? Stupid is more like it. Did they really think we wouldn't notice? I think they planned to be long gone before we figured it out. Probably would have worked too if Alma hadn't gotten careless with her phone. Kalia spoke up. What's the legal exposure here? Conrad and I exchanged glances. Significant, I said. Corporate espionage, breach of fiduciary duty, possibly wire fraud if they used electronic communications to coordinate. Which they did, Conrad added, tapping the stack of printed text messages. Extensively. My phone buzzed with a text from Alma. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret. I showed it to Conrad, who snorted. Little late for that conversation. Should I respond? Absolutely. I typed back, nothing to discuss. You have 3 hours to clear out of the office. Her response came immediately. You're making a mistake. I know things about this company that could hurt you. Like what? Like where the real money comes from, and who's been helping you hide it. I stared at the phone, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. What do you think she means? Conrad's face had gone carefully blank. Probably just trying to scare you. Con. It's nothing, said. Just some creative accounting from the early years. Nothing illegal. What kind of creative accounting? He sighed and rubbed his forehead. Remember when we were struggling, right after Dad passed? We had that big municipal contract, but the city was late paying. The traffic light project. Right. Well, I may have adjusted some of the billing dates, made it look like payments came in earlier than they did, for tax purposes. How much earlier? Different fiscal year entirely. I closed my eyes. Conrad, please tell me you didn't. It was temporary, and we paid everything we owed, plus penalties. The IRS never even questioned it. But if someone wanted to make it look worse than it was, they could probably cause us some serious headaches. Kalia looked between us. How serious? Serious enough, I admitted. Alma always handled our books. She'd know exactly which transactions to highlight. My phone rang. Alma's number. Answer it, Conrad said. But put it on speaker. I did. Cedric, we need to meet. I told you, there's nothing to discuss. There's plenty to discuss, like the conversation I had with a friend at the state tax office this morning. You're bluffing. Am I? Would you like me to read you the email I'm about to send? It's very detailed. Lots of specific dates and amounts. Conrad was shaking his head, but I could see the worry in his eyes. What do you want, Alma? I want you to stop this ridiculous revenge fantasy and act like an adult. Rylan and I made mistakes, but destroying our lives won't fix your wounded ego. My wounded ego? That's what this is really about, isn't it? Your pride. You can't stand that I chose someone else. The phone creaked in my grip. This is about theft, Alma, and betrayal and fraud. Prove it. I already have. Have you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a disgruntled husband trying to frame his wife and her friend for crimes they didn't commit. Very sad, really. Especially when that same husband has been cooking his own books for years. Conrad grabbed the phone. Alma, this is Conrad. You're playing with fire here. Hello, Con. Still covering for your baby brother, I see. How noble. I wonder what the licensing board will think about that. You report us, you go down too. You sign those returns. Under duress. Poor little wife, trusting her husband and brother-in-law to handle the complicated financial stuff. I had no idea what I was signing. The line went quiet for a moment. Here's what's going to happen, Alma continued. Rylan keeps his job. I keep my access to the accounts. And we all pretend this morning never happened. Or what? Or I destroy this company and everything you've both worked for. Your choice. She hung up. Conrad and I stared at each other. Kalia broke the silence. She's bluffing. Maybe, I said. But she's not stupid. She knows exactly which pressure points to hit. So what do we do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo message from Rylan. A picture of himself sitting in his office, feet up on the desk, grinning at the camera. The message read, Thanks for the promotion, boss. That decides it, I said. Decides what? They want to play hardball? Fine. But they are about to learn that I've been playing this game a lot longer than they have. I walked to Conrad's window and looked down at the parking lot. Rylan's BMW was in its usual spot, gleaming in the morning sun. As I watched, he emerged from the building and walked toward it, probably heading out for one of his famous client meetings. Kalia, how do you feel about a little field trip? What kind of field trip? The kind where we remind Rylan that actions have consequences, and that some consequences are more immediate than others. Conrad grinned for the first time all morning. Now you're talking my language. We took my truck, following Rylan at a discreet distance. He drove to the upscale fitness center where he'd been spending so much time lately, the same one where Alma had supposedly been taking yoga classes. Interesting choice for a business meeting, Kalia observed. Very interesting. We parked across the street and watched Rylan disappear inside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, we could see him greeting a group of men in expensive workout gear. Friends of his? Conrad asked. More like enablers, Kalia said. He's always bragging about his gym buddies. Apparently they think he's some kind of business genius. Perfect. I got out of the truck and walked to the back, where I kept my work supplies. Every electrician carries certain tools of the trade: wire strippers, voltage testers, electrical tape. But we also carry other things: emergency supplies, items that might come in handy during unexpected situations, like a bag of industrial-grade fish fertilizer. Cedric, Conrad said, what are you doing? Creating a learning opportunity. The fertilizer had been sitting in my truck since a job last month where we'd rewired a greenhouse. It was organic, environmentally safe, and possessed a smell that could clear a room at 50 yards. I walked casually to Rylan's BMW and glanced around. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars near the gym entrance. No security cameras that I could see. The fertilizer went under his car, spread evenly around the tires and ventilation intake. By the time he started the engine, the smell would be circulating through the entire vehicle. But that was just the appetizer. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of his license plate, then sent it to a friend who worked for a towing company, along with a message. This car is parked illegally in a handicapped spot. Owner is inside the gym. It wasn't true, of course, but by the time Rylan came outside and explained the situation, he'd have other problems to worry about, like the smell, and the note I left on his windshield. Enjoying your workout? Hope you're building up your stamina. You're going to need it. See. We drove back to the office and waited. It didn't take long. My phone rang 20 minutes later. You son of a... Language, Rylan. Remember, you're a professional. What did you do to my car? I have no idea what you're talking about. Is there a problem? It smells like something crawled inside and rotted, and now it's being towed. That's terrible. Have you considered that maybe the universe is trying to tell you something? This isn't funny, Cedric. You're right, it's hilarious. I know it was you. Prove it. The line went quiet for a moment. This isn't over. No, it's not. In fact, it's just getting started. See you at the staff meeting this afternoon. I hung up and looked at Conrad and Kalia, both of whom were trying not to laugh. Think he got the message? Conrad asked. One day, if he didn't, the next one will be clearer. What's the next one? I smiled. That depends on what Alma and Rylan do next, but I've got a feeling they're about to make this very interesting. As if summoned by my words, my office phone rang. The caller ID showed our main number. Parish Electric, this is Cedric. Mr. Fallon, this is Janet from the front desk. There's a woman here to see you, says she's your wife. She seems upset. Through my office window, I could see into the lobby. Alma stood near the reception desk, her face flushed with anger. She'd changed clothes since this morning, trading her silk robe for a business suit that screamed, "Take me seriously." Send her up, I said. Are you sure? She's making quite a scene. I'm sure. I hung up and turned to Conrad and Kalia. Showtime. Alma entered my office like a storm front, all sharp edges and barely contained fury. She'd brought reinforcements, a thin man in an expensive suit who screamed lawyer from 50 feet away. Cedric, we need to talk. We talked this morning. I thought I was pretty clear. This is my attorney, David Marsh. He specializes in corporate law. Marsh stepped forward with the kind of smile that probably cost $500 an hour. Mr. Fallon, I think there's been a misunderstanding. My client is prepared to be reasonable, but your recent actions constitute harassment. Which actions would those be? The unauthorized access to private communications, the threats, the vandalism of Mr. Ventor's vehicle. I leaned back in my chair. I'm sorry, did you just accuse me of vandalizing a car? The incident at the fitness center this morning. What incident? I was here all morning. Conrad, was I here all morning? My brother nodded solemnly. Never left the building? We were reviewing contracts. And I can vouch for that, Kalia added from her seat near the window. Marsh's confidence flickered slightly. Nevertheless, my client has evidence of a pattern of harassment. Such as? Alma pulled out her phone and started reading. Threatening text messages, invasion of privacy, interference with business relationships. Interesting. Could you be more specific about these threatening messages? She scrolled through her phone, then frowned. The messages seem to have been deleted. How convenient. And the invasion of privacy? You went through my personal belongings. In my own house, looking for my own property, which I discovered had been stolen. Marsh cleared his throat. Mr. Fallon, my client is prepared to file for divorce on grounds of mental cruelty and harassment. She's also considering a restraining order. She's welcome to try. Of course, that would require her to provide evidence of the alleged harassment, and it would also require her to explain why she needs protection from her own husband. What do you mean? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. I mean that filing legal documents opens doors that might be better left closed. For instance, it would require full financial disclosure, asset declarations, income statements. Alma's face went pale. You wouldn't? Try me. Marsh looked between us, sensing undercurrents he didn't understand. Perhaps we could discuss a settlement. What kind of settlement? My client is willing to forgo any claim to the business in exchange for a reasonable financial arrangement and assurance that the harassment will stop. I laughed. Actually laughed. She's willing to forgo claim to a business she was trying to steal? How generous. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. I pulled out the business plan for Ventor Consulting and slid it across the desk. Take a look at page 12, the client acquisition strategy. Marsh read for a moment, his expression growing troubled. Where did you get this? Does it matter? What matters is the content. Notice how they plan to use confidential parish electric information to undercut our bids. This could be fabricated. Could be, but it's not. And I have corroborating evidence. Bank records, email communications, witness statements. Alma found her voice. Witnesses to what? To your meetings with our competitors, to Rylan's attempts to access our client database, to your joint planning sessions at the Riverside Hotel. You've been following us? I've been protecting my business. There's a difference. Marsh was studying the business plan more carefully now. Even if this document is authentic, it doesn't prove criminal intent, doesn't it? Page 15 outlines how they plan to time their departure to maximize damage to our current projects. Page 18 discusses which employees they intended to recruit, and page 23... I paused for effect. Page 23 explains how they were going to use forged documents to claim ownership of our client relationships. That last part wasn't true, but Marsh didn't know that. His reaction told me everything I needed to know about how seriously he was taking this situation. Mr. Fallon, perhaps we should approach this differently. I'm listening. What would it take to resolve this matter quietly? Full confession, public apology, restitution for damages, and a written guarantee that neither Alma nor Rylan will ever work in the electrical contracting industry again? That's unreasonable. So is stealing a man's business and trying to frame him for tax evasion. Alma jerked like she'd been shocked. How did you know about your call to the tax office? Simple. I called them first. The room went very quiet. You see, Alma, when you've been in business as long as I have, you develop relationships, contacts, people who trust you. So when I called the state tax office this morning and explained that someone might be filing false reports about my company, they were very interested. You're lying. Am I? Would you like to call them and ask? I'm sure they'd love to hear from you again, especially since making false reports to state agencies is a felony. Marsh was scribbling notes furiously. My client may have been overzealous in her approach. Your client attempted to extort me using fabricated evidence. In most states, that's called blackmail. Now see here. No, you see here. I stood up, and something in my posture made both of them step back. I've been patient. I've been reasonable. I've given them multiple opportunities to walk away from this with some dignity intact. But instead of taking those opportunities, they've chosen to escalate. What are you saying? I'm saying the time for negotiation is over. Alma, you have until 5 o'clock to clean out your desk and return all company property. That includes the corporate credit card, the company phone, and the keys to the office. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, I file criminal charges for embezzlement, corporate espionage, and fraud. I also release all the evidence to our industry association, our clients, and the local media. Marsh tried one more time. Mr. Fallon, surely we can reach some accommodation. The accommodation was offered this morning. It was rejected. Now we do this the hard way. My office door opened, and Conrad walked in carrying a banker's box. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought Alma might need this for her personal items. He set the box on my desk with a thud that sounded remarkably final. There's a security guard waiting downstairs to escort you to your office, he added. Company policy for terminated employees. Alma's composure finally cracked completely. You bastard. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. Rylan and you are finished, both professionally and personally, and if you think otherwise, you're about to learn just how wrong you can be. She picked up the banker's box and moved toward the door, with Marsh following uncertainly behind her. This isn't over, Cedric. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. After they left, Conrad closed the door and grinned. That was beautiful, especially the part about calling the tax office first. Who says I was bluffing? You actually called them? First thing this morning. Explained the whole situation to a very sympathetic investigator named Patricia Chen. Turns out they get attempted extortion calls about once a week. They're not fond of people who try to weaponize the tax system. Kalia shook her head admiringly. You've been planning this for days, haven't you? Weeks, actually. I started getting suspicious when Alma suddenly became interested in our financial records. She'd never cared about the business side before. What made you start investigating? Small things at first. She was working late more often, taking calls in the other room, new clothes, new jewelry, new attitude. But the real red flag was when she started asking about our client contracts. Why? Because Alma hates the technical side of the business. Always has. For her to suddenly want details about project timelines and pricing structures, it didn't make sense unless she had a reason. Conrad nodded. So you started documenting everything. Everything. Phone records, credit card statements, computer access logs, security footage. I even hired a private investigator to follow them. You hired a PI? Best money I ever spent. Got photos, recorded conversations, financial records. Turns out they weren't nearly as careful as they thought. My phone buzzed with a text message. From Rylan. You win this round, but this isn't over. I showed it to Conrad and Kalia. Think he means it? Conrad asked. Probably, but it doesn't matter. By tomorrow, neither of them will be in any position to cause trouble. Why tomorrow? Because that's when the real consequences kick in. I walked to my office safe and pulled out another folder, this one even thicker than the first. What's that? Insurance. See, when you're planning to destroy someone's life, it pays to be thorough. This contains copies of everything I've discovered, plus a few extra surprises. Such as? Such as evidence that Rylan's been skimming money from his consulting fees, and proof that Alma's been using company resources for personal expenses, and documentation of their plan to steal our 3 biggest clients. Kalia whistled softly. How much money are we talking about? Enough to qualify as grand larceny in Massachusetts, enough to get them both charged with felonies. Are you really going to file charges? That depends on what they do next. If they disappear quietly, I might be inclined to let sleeping dogs lie. But if they keep pushing, I didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication was clear. My phone rang again. This time it was our receptionist. Mr. Fallon, there's a police officer here to see you. Says it's about a complaint filed by your wife? I sighed. Send him up. Police? Conrad asked. Alma's last desperate play. She probably claimed I threatened her or something equally ridiculous. Did you? Define threatened. The officer who entered my office was young, probably fresh out of the academy, with the earnest expression of someone who still believed in the system. Mr. Fallon, I'm Officer Martinez. I need to ask you a few questions about an incident involving your wife. What kind of incident? She claims you've been harassing her, following her, vandalizing property, making threats. I see. And what evidence did she provide to support these claims? Martinez consulted his notepad. She mentioned threatening text messages, but apparently they were accidentally deleted. She also mentioned an incident involving a car. Whose car? A Mr. Rylan Ventor. She claims you damaged his vehicle this morning. I looked at Conrad and Kalia, both of whom were struggling not to smile. Officer Martinez, I've been in this building all morning. I can provide witnesses, security footage, even phone records showing I made several business calls from this office. She seemed very upset. I'm sure she was. I fired her today for embezzlement and corporate espionage. People tend to get upset when they're caught stealing. Martinez looked uncomfortable. She didn't mention being fired. I'm not surprised. She also probably didn't mention that she's been planning to steal my business and frame me for tax evasion. Sir, those are serious accusations. Yes, they are. Would you like to see the evidence? I pulled out the folder and spread its contents across my desk. Martinez studied the documents, his expression growing more serious. This is extensive. I believe in being thorough. Have you filed a complaint? Not yet. I was hoping to resolve this privately. But if Mrs. Fallon insists on involving law enforcement, I'm prepared to do the same. Martinez closed his notepad. Mr. Fallon, I'm going to recommend that both parties step back and let their lawyers handle this. But if you have evidence of criminal activity, you should file a formal complaint. I'll consider it. After the officer left, Conrad shook his head. She's really not going quietly, is she? Nope, which means we move to phase 2. There's a phase 2? There's always a phase 2. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized 3 days ago. Patricia, it's Cedric Fallon. I think it's time we had that conversation about filing formal charges. The call to Patricia Chen at the state tax office was brief and productive. By the end of it, I had an appointment for Monday morning and a case number for what she termed attempted fraudulent reporting with intent to harm. But Monday felt like a lifetime away, and I could already sense that Alma and Rylan weren't planning to wait quietly for the legal system to grind into motion. My suspicions were confirmed at 3:47 p.m. when our security system triggered an alert. Someone was trying to access the building after hours, using what appeared to be an employee keycard. That's interesting, Conrad said, studying the security monitor. Alma's keycard was deactivated this morning. But Rylan's wasn't, I realized. I fired him, but HR probably hasn't processed the paperwork yet. We watched the grainy black and white feed as two figures moved through the lobby toward the elevator. Even in the poor lighting, their body language screamed guilt and desperation. What do you think they're after? Kalia asked. The server room, I said. They need to delete evidence before we can use it against them. Conrad was already reaching for his coat. Should we call the police? Not yet. Let's see what they're really up to first. The parish electric building was designed with security in mind. Multiple entry points, but all monitored. The server room was on the 3rd floor, protected by both keycard access and a separate alarm system. If Alma and Rylan were planning to break in there, they'd trigger half a dozen alerts. We took Conrad's truck and parked across the street, watching the building. Through the 3rd floor windows, we could see lights moving. Flashlights, probably, since they wouldn't want to risk turning on the main lighting. There, Kalia pointed. 3rd floor, northeast corner. The server room, right where I'd expected them to go. My phone buzzed with another security alert. This one more serious. Unauthorized access attempted. Server room. Multiple failed keycard attempts. They can't get in, Conrad observed. Not with a keycard, but Rylan knows the building layout. He also knows we keep emergency keys in the facility's manager's office. As if responding to my words, the lights on the 3rd floor shifted, moving toward the opposite end of the building. We should stop them, Kalia said. Not yet. I want to see how far they're willing to go. 20 minutes later, they found what they were looking for. The server room lights came on, and I could see two figures moving around inside. Now we call the police? Conrad asked. Now we spring the trap. What trap? I smiled. The one I set up 3 days ago. The parish electric server room contained more than just computer equipment. It also housed our backup power systems, environmental controls, and, most importantly for my purposes, a very special security feature I'd installed personally, a motion-activated paint dispersal system. You didn't, Conrad said. I did. Anyone who enters that room without disabling the system first gets marked with industrial-grade paint, the kind that doesn't wash off easily. That's brilliant. That's just the beginning. As we watched, something happened on the 3rd floor. The lights went out suddenly, and even from across the street we could hear shouting. Think it worked? Kalia asked. Let's find out. We drove around to the building's rear entrance and waited. 5 minutes later, the back door burst open, and two figures stumbled out into the alley. Even in the dim light, the bright blue paint was unmistakable. Alma and Rylan looked like they'd been dipped in a swimming pool. The paint covered their clothes, their hair, their skin. They were arguing loudly, their voices carrying in the cold evening air. You said you knew how to disable the security system. I thought I did. How was I supposed to know about the paint thing? This is insane. We look like refugees from a children's birthday party. At least we got what we came for. Rylan held up a small device, a portable hard drive. They'd managed to copy files from our server before the paint bomb went off. Too bad it won't do them any good, I murmured. Why not? Because the files they copied are decoys. I replaced all the sensitive data with harmless business documents 3 days ago. What they stole is worthless. Conrad laughed quietly. You really have been planning this for weeks. Planning is everything, but execution is what matters. We followed them at a distance as they made their way to Rylan's car, which had apparently been retrieved from the towing company, though it still smelled strongly of fish fertilizer. "Where do you think they're going?" Kalia asked. "Probably back to one of their hideouts. They'll want to clean up and figure out their next move. Should we follow them?" "No need. I know exactly where they're going." "How?" "Because I've been tracking Alma's phone for the past week. Amazing what you can do with shared family accounts and a little technical knowledge." I pulled out my tablet and showed them the GPS tracking display. 2 dots were moving across the digital map, heading toward the industrial district on the outskirts of town. "The old Morrison warehouse," Conrad said. "That place has been empty for years. Perfect location for people who want to avoid attention. Isolated, no security cameras, multiple exit routes. So what's the plan? We wait. Let them think they're safe. Give them time to make their next mistake. And then we finish this." The tracking dots stopped moving about 20 minutes later, confirming that Alma and Rylan had reached their destination. I switched the tablet to satellite view and studied the warehouse layout. Single-story building, loading docks on 3 sides, office complex attached to the north end. If they're smart, they'll park inside one of the loading bays to hide the car. And if they're not smart, then this gets easier. We drove to the warehouse district, a collection of aging industrial buildings that had seen better days. The Morrison warehouse sat at the end of a bad-end street, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned equipment. Rylan's BMW was parked outside the main entrance, still covered in blue paint. "Not smart," Kalia observed. "Definitely not smart." We parked behind a pile of rusted shipping containers and watched the building. Through the grimy windows, we could see lights moving around inside. "What are they doing in there?" Conrad asked. "Probably trying to clean off the paint and planning their next move." "Which would be what?" "If I had to guess, they're going to try to disappear. New identities, new location, new plan. The stolen data was supposed to be their insurance policy. But since the data is worthless, they're going to get desperate, and desperate people make stupid mistakes." As if summoned by my words, we heard shouting from inside the warehouse. Angry voices, getting louder. "Sounds like they're having a disagreement," Kalia said. "About what?" "Probably about whose fault this is, and what to do next." The shouting continued for several minutes, then stopped abruptly. A moment later, we saw a figure emerge from the building. Alma, still covered in blue paint, carrying a large bag. She walked to the car, threw the bag in the trunk, and went back inside. "Packing," Conrad said. "Looks like it." 10 minutes later, both Alma and Rylan came out, each carrying multiple bags. They loaded everything into the BMW and stood beside the car, having what appeared to be an intense conversation. "Decision time," I said. "Should we move in?" "Not yet. I want to see which direction they go." They got in the car and drove off, heading toward the highway. I started our engine and followed, keeping well back. "Where do you think they're going?" Kalia asked. "If they're smart, they'll head for the state line. Try to get some distance before we can organize a response. And if they're not smart, they'll do something predictable, like going back to one of their usual meeting places." The BMW took the on-ramp toward the interstate, confirming my first guess. They were running. "Should we call the police now?" Conrad asked. "Not yet. I want to see how far they're willing to go." We followed them for 20 miles, staying far enough back to avoid detection. The BMW maintained a steady speed, staying just under the speed limit, smart driving for people trying to avoid attention. But then something unexpected happened. The BMW's brake lights came on, and it started slowing down. A moment later, it pulled off at a rest stop. "Why are they stopping?" Kalia asked. "Good question." We parked at the far end of the rest stop and watched. Alma and Rylan got out of the car and walked to a picnic table where they sat down and appeared to be having another intense conversation. "They're arguing again," Conrad observed. "About what, though?" My question was answered when Alma pulled out her phone and made a call. Even from our distance, we could see her gesturing angrily. "Who do you think she's calling?" "Could be anyone. Lawyer, friend, family member." "Or," Kalia said quietly, "someone we don't know about." "What do you mean?" "What if this whole thing is bigger than just Alma and Rylan? What if there are other people involved?" The possibility hadn't occurred to me, but it made sense. The business plan for Ventor Consulting had been too sophisticated, too detailed for 2 amateurs to have created on their own. "You think they had help?" "I think we're about to find out." As we watched, a black sedan pulled into the rest stop and parked near the BMW. 2 men got out, both wearing expensive suits and serious expressions. "Friends of theirs?" Conrad asked. "Doesn't look friendly to me." The conversation between the four of them was brief but intense. Even from our distance, we could see aggressive body language and pointing fingers. Then one of the men from the sedan opened his jacket, revealing something that made both Alma and Rylan step back. "Was that a weapon?" Kalia whispered. "Looked like it." "Should we call the police now?" "Definitely." But before I could reach for my phone, the situation escalated. The two men grabbed Alma and Rylan, forcing them toward the sedan. "They're being abducted," Conrad said. "Or they're going willingly. Hard to tell from here. Either way, we need to do something." I was already dialing 911 when the sedan's doors slammed shut and it sped away, leaving the BMW behind in the rest stop. "This is 911. What's your emergency?" "I need to report a possible abduction. 2 people were just forced into a car at the Route 95 rest stop, northbound side." The dispatcher took down the details and assured me that units were being dispatched, but I had a feeling we were too late. The BMW sat abandoned in the rest stop parking lot, its doors still open, blue paint glinting in the fluorescent lights. "What do you think just happened?" Kalia asked. "I think Alma and Rylan just discovered that they weren't the only ones with a plan." "Meaning?" "Meaning this whole thing might be bigger than I thought, and a lot more dangerous." The state police arrived at the rest stop within 15 minutes, but by then the black sedan was long gone. Officer Martinez, the same young cop who'd visited my office earlier, took our statements while crime scene technicians processed the abandoned BMW. "You're sure they were taken against their will?" he asked for the 3rd time. "It looked that way to me," I said. "But I'll admit, the whole situation was confusing." "And you have no idea who the other 2 men were?" "Never seen them before." Martinez closed his notepad and looked at me with something approaching suspicion. "Mr. Fallon, in my experience, when this many unusual things happen to the same people in one day, it's usually not a coincidence." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe there's more to this story than you've told me." He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to admit that. "Officer, my wife and her boyfriend tried to steal my company. When that failed, they broke into my building and tried to destroy evidence. Now they've apparently gotten involved with some very dangerous people. I'm as confused as you are." "Are you?" Before I could answer, Martinez's radio crackled. "Unit 47. We've got a situation at the Morrison warehouse. Possible break-in, shots fired." Martinez looked at me sharply. "Isn't that where you followed them earlier?" "We never went inside. Just watched from a distance." "Right. Stay here. Don't leave until we've finished processing the scene." He got in his patrol car and sped away, leaving us standing in the rest stop parking lot with a growing sense that this situation was spiraling out of control. "Shots fired?" Kalia said. "What do you think that means?" "Nothing good." Conrad was studying the abandoned BMW. "Look at this." He pointed to the trunk, which was slightly open. Inside, we could see scattered papers and what looked like computer equipment. "They left everything behind," he said, "or it was taken from them." I pulled out my phone and called Patricia Chen at the tax office. She answered on the 2nd ring, despite the late hour. "Patricia, it's Cedric Fallon. We may have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves federal agencies. I think my wife and her boyfriend were working with people I don't know about. Dangerous people." "How dangerous?" "The kind that carry weapons and abduct people in broad daylight." There was a long pause. "Mr. Fallon, I think you need to contact the FBI." "The FBI?" "If this involves interstate commerce, corporate espionage, and organized crime, it's beyond what state agencies can handle." "Organized crime?" "Think about it. Your wife and her boyfriend had access to sensitive business information, client lists, project schedules, financial data. That kind of information is valuable to the right buyers." The pieces clicked into place with nauseating clarity. "You think they were selling our secrets?" "I think it's possible. And if that's the case, the people they were working with won't want loose ends." "Like Alma and Rylan." "Exactly." I hung up and turned to Conrad and Kalia. "We need to get out of here." "Why?" "Because if Patricia's right, we're dealing with organized crime. And if Alma and Rylan told them about me, about what I know..." "We could be targets too," Kalia finished. "Let's not find out." We were walking back to Conrad's truck when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Don't answer it," Conrad said, but something made me pick up anyway. "Cedric Fallon?" "Speaking." "My name is Agent Sarah Collins, FBI. I understand you've been having some trouble with your wife and business partner." "How did you?" "We've been investigating Ventor Consulting for several weeks. Your wife and Mr. Ventor were selling information to a group we've been tracking." "What kind of group?" The kind that specializes in corporate espionage and industrial sabotage. They target small businesses with valuable client relationships. And now? Now your wife and Mr. Ventor are in federal custody, and we need to talk. They're alive? They're safe, but we need your cooperation to finish this investigation. What kind of cooperation? The kind that involves you wearing a wire and meeting with some very dangerous people. I looked at Conrad and Kalia, both of whom were listening to my side of the conversation with growing alarm. Agent Collins, I'm an electrician, not an undercover agent. Mr. Fallon, these people have your business records, your client information, and probably your personal data too. If we don't stop them, they'll destroy your company and possibly target your family. What do you need me to do? Meet us at the Morrison warehouse. We'll explain everything there. The warehouse district looked different at night. Federal vehicles surrounded the Morrison building, and portable lights had turned the parking lot into something resembling a movie set. Agent Collins turned out to be a compact woman in her 40s, with the kind of intensity that suggested she'd seen too much and slept too little. Mr. Fallon, thank you for coming. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice, but some choices are better than others. She led us inside the warehouse, where a command post had been set up with computers, communication equipment, and wall-mounted displays showing surveillance photos. This is what we're dealing with, she said, pointing to a collection of mugshots. The Kozlov organization. They specialize in corporate espionage, usually targeting small businesses and technical industries. Why small businesses? Less security, more desperate for business, easier to infiltrate. They identify companies with valuable client relationships, then insert operatives to steal information. Operatives like Alma and Rylan. Usually, they recruit from within. Disgruntled employees, people with financial problems, anyone with access and motivation. So, this was never about their affair? The affair was real, but it was also convenient cover for their real activities. Agent Collins pulled up another display, this one showing financial records. Ventor Consulting received over $200,000 in the past 6 months, all from shell companies controlled by the Kozlov organization. $200,000? For what? Client lists, project schedules, pricing information, technical specifications, everything needed to undercut your bids and steal your customers. Conrad whistled softly. That's our entire client base. Which is why we need your help. The Kozlovs are planning to expand their operation. They want to target every electrical contractor in Massachusetts. What do you need me to do? We've arranged a meeting. The Kozlovs think Alma and Rylan escaped federal custody. They want to meet with you to negotiate. Negotiate what? Your silence. They'll offer you money to keep quiet about what you've discovered. And then? And then we arrest them all. I looked around the command post, taking in the serious faces and high-tech equipment. This is really happening, isn't it? It's really happening. What about Alma and Rylan? They're cooperating fully, in exchange for reduced sentences and witness protection. Witness protection? The Kozlovs don't like loose ends. Your wife and Mr. Ventor will need new identities and new locations. So, they get to disappear while I risk my life to clean up their mess? Agent Collins studied my face. Mr. Fallon, I understand your anger, but right now, you're the only person who can help us stop these people. And if I refuse, then they'll probably target you anyway. At least this way, you'll have federal protection. The meeting was set for midnight at an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town. I wore a wire, carried a tracking device, and had 3 federal agents watching from concealed positions. The Kozlovs arrived in 2 black sedans, just like the one from the rest stop. 4 men in expensive suits, all carrying themselves like people accustomed to violence. The leader introduced himself as Victor Kozlov, mid-50s, gray hair, cold eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Fallon, I understand we have a problem. Several problems, actually. Your wife and her boyfriend were careless. They left evidence that could be embarrassing for all of us. What kind of evidence? The kind that could send people to prison, or worse. What do you want from me? Silence, cooperation, and a guarantee that this unfortunate situation will be resolved quietly. In exchange for what? Money. More than you could make in 10 years of electrical work. How much money? $500,000, cash, no questions asked. It was a fortune, more than enough to rebuild Parish Electric, relocate if necessary, start over somewhere safe. And all I have to do is keep quiet? All you have to do is forget this ever happened. I pretended to consider the offer while the wire recorded every word. What about Alma and Rylan? They're no longer your concern. Meaning? Meaning they've been relocated, permanently. The way he said it made my skin crawl. You're talking about witness protection? Victor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Something like that. I need time to think about this. You have until tomorrow night. After that, the offer expires. And if I refuse, then you join your wife and her boyfriend in their new location. The threat was clear. Cooperate or disappear. I understand. Good. We'll contact you tomorrow with instructions. The meeting ended, and I drove back to the warehouse, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The wire had recorded everything, but I felt like I just made a deal with the devil. Agent Collins was waiting for me in the command post. How did it go? They offered me $500,000 to keep quiet. And if you refuse, they'll make me disappear, just like they plan to do with Alma and Rylan. Which means we need to move fast. The raid is set for tomorrow night. What about me? You'll be in protective custody until this is over. And after? After, you go back to your life. Your company is safe, your family is safe, and the Kozlovs are in federal prison. What about Alma and Rylan? They'll serve reduced sentences and enter witness protection. You'll probably never see them again. I thought about that for a moment. Never seeing Alma again should have felt like a relief, but instead it felt like the end of something I'd never fully understood. Agent Collins, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think they ever loved each other? Or was it all just part of the plan? She considered the question seriously. Does it matter? I guess not. Mr. Fallon, some people are capable of love. Others are only capable of using people. The trick is learning to tell the difference. And if you can't, then you end up in situations like this. The raid happened exactly as planned. Federal agents surrounded the gas station at midnight, arresting Viktor Kozlov and his associates without firing a shot. The surveillance equipment captured everything, the money, the threats, the admission of criminal intent. It was over. I stood in the parking lot afterward, watching the FBI load evidence into their vehicles. Conrad and Kalia were beside me, both looking as exhausted as I felt. What happens now? Kalia asked. Now we go back to work, I said. We rebuild what they tried to destroy. And Alma and Rylan? They're someone else's problem now. Agent Collins approached us as the last of the federal vehicles prepared to leave. Mr. Fallon, thank you for your cooperation. The Bureau owes you a debt of gratitude. Just doing what needed to be done. Your wife asked me to give you a message. I don't want to hear it. She said to tell you she was sorry. For everything. I thought about that for a moment. Agent Collins, some apologies come too late to matter. I understand. Do you? Because I'm not sure I do. 23 years of marriage, and I never really knew who she was. Maybe you knew who she used to be. People change. Or maybe they just show you who they really are. Agent Collins nodded and walked away, leaving us alone in the empty parking lot. So what now? Conrad asked. Now we go home? Tomorrow we start over? Think it'll be that easy? No, but it'll be honest. We got in Conrad's truck and drove back toward town. In the distance, I could see the lights of Parish Electric Company still burning in the third-floor windows. You know what the funny thing is? I said. What? They could have just asked. If Alma had wanted a divorce, if Rylan had wanted to start his own company, if they'd just been honest about what they wanted, we could have worked something out. Instead, they chose to steal it. Instead, they chose to lie, and lying always has consequences. We drove through the empty streets of our small Massachusetts town, past the buildings and businesses that had been part of my life for 43 years. Tomorrow, I'd start rebuilding what had been broken. But tonight, I was just grateful to be alive. Some circuits, once broken, could never be repaired. But sometimes that was exactly what needed to happen. Sometimes you had to tear down the old wiring completely before you could build something new. And sometimes the new system worked better than the old one ever had. I was looking forward to finding out.